The door didn't slam. That's the part that bothered me most. She just closed it gently behind her, like she was going to the grocery store. Like she hadn't just looked me in the eyes and said, "You don't get to control me." I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't begged. All I'd said was, "Don't go. Please." She paused at the door. Her hand gripped the handle like it was her lifeline, like walking out was harder than she expected. But then she said it. The sentence that's been repeating in my head for the last 3 hours like a broken record. "It's just dinner. Grow up." Then the quiet click of the lock sliding into place. I stood there for a full 10 minutes after she left, staring at the empty hallway. There was a coat missing from the rack. Her perfume still hung in the air, that vanilla and fig scent she wears when she wants to feel noticed. I went back to the kitchen. Her wine glass was still on the table, half full. The spaghetti I made sat untouched in her bowl, already stiffening. I ate mine in silence. It wasn't about the date. It wasn't even about the guy. It was about the way she looked at me when she told me no, like I was small, like I was in her way. I went to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, the side she never sleeps on anymore. Her phone charger was gone. That's when I realized this dinner had been planned longer than she'd let on. So I did something I never thought I would. I opened my drawer and pulled out the small plastic bag I'd been hiding since December. It was meant to be a surprise for our anniversary. A necklace, simple, gold, with a tiny charm shaped like a paper crane, an inside joke from our first trip to Seattle. She'd forgotten that joke. I slipped it into my jacket pocket, then walked to the closet. Her red heels, the ones she only wears when she wants to turn heads, were gone. But here's the thing. She didn't know I'd called the restaurant an hour before she left. She didn't know I'd reserved a table for one, under a different name, 2 booths behind the one she was going to sit at. She didn't know I had already been there, that I had seen them arrive, that I had watched him hold the door for her, his hand resting on her lower back like he had every right in the world to touch her that way. She didn't know I'd already paid their waiter to record audio. She didn't know I had already left by the time she even looked at the menu. And she definitely didn't know what I left waiting on the kitchen counter, just beneath her wine glass. But she'd find it soon enough. I didn't do anything cruel. Nothing dramatic. No explosions, no shouting. Just a folded envelope with 4 things inside. A receipt, a note, a photograph, and the key to our storage unit. She won't understand it all at once. But she will. Eventually. She got home just after midnight. I was already in the bedroom with the lights off, pretending to sleep. I heard the front door click, the soft shuffle of her heels across the floor, the clink of her keys as she dropped them in the glass bowl by the door. For a moment, everything went still. I imagined her scanning the room, expecting to find me curled up on the couch like I always am when I get upset. Non-confrontational, spineless, familiar. But I wasn't on the couch this time. I knew the moment she found the envelope. There was no gasp, no scream, no dramatic crash of a wine glass. Just the distinct sound of paper sliding out of its jacket, followed by long, heavy silence. I could hear her breathing. She didn't say a word, didn't even call out my name. I imagined her holding the photograph first. Me, sitting alone at the restaurant, not 2 booths behind her, taken from the reflection in the glass. She probably thought I had followed her there, that I was lurking like some kind of creep. But I hadn't. I'd been there first. The receipt came next. A paid bill for 2 entrees, dessert, and 2 glasses of Pinot Noir, ordered and paid for by me before she and her date even sat down. I doubt she noticed the server hesitate when he handed her the menu. I doubt she noticed the way he smiled too hard. But I did. Then the note. Just 3 lines. "I loved you more than I loved myself. You gave that smile to someone else. The unit is 74B. I had rehearsed those words in my head 100 times. They weren't threatening. They weren't poetic. They were just facts, plain and unadorned, like me. She wouldn't understand what 74B meant right away, but curiosity would get the best of her. I was counting on that. By the time I heard her bedroom door creak open an hour later, I had already slipped out through the back. She wouldn't see my car. I walked half a mile through the neighborhood, past dim streetlights and empty porches, to a spot where my brother picked me up. I didn't say much, just that I needed a place to crash for the night and maybe a few after that. He didn't ask questions. That's the thing about being the disappointment in the family. People don't expect much from you, and sometimes that's a good thing. The next day, I tracked her phone's location, not to spy, but to confirm. She went to the storage facility just after noon. I pictured her pulling up in that little white SUV, still wearing the same heels, with yesterday's makeup smeared beneath her eyes. I pictured her standing in front of the metal door, struggling with the padlock, unsure whether to open it. Inside 74B was everything I'd taken from the house over the last 2 weeks, quietly, without drama. My clothes, my tools, my records. The framed photo of her and me in front of the cabin from our 5th anniversary trip, the one she never dusted anymore. And one more thing, the necklace. The paper crane. Still in its box, untouched, never worn. I'd left a note under it, just one line this time. I never bought it for you. I bought it for the woman I thought you were. Then I turned off location tracking. Permanently. I didn't hear from her for 2 full days. No texts, no calls. Nothing. And I started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, I'd misjudged how she'd react. That maybe she really didn't care. That maybe all those years of me folding laundry, making dinner, offering foot rubs after her long days, maybe it never really mattered to her the way it did to me. That thought sat like a brick in my chest. But on the 3rd night, she showed up. She banged on my brother's front door like she was trying to break it down. He opened it before I could stop him, and there she was, makeup streaked, hair a mess, clutching the box with the necklace like it meant something now. "Where is he?" she said, her voice shaking, not from cold, but from the kind of fear that creeps in when the person you're sure will always be there suddenly isn't. I didn't come out right away. I wanted to hear what she'd say when she thought I wasn't listening. What she said shook me more than I expected. She stood in the foyer like she didn't know what to do with her hands, gripping that little jewelry box like it held the last thread of our entire marriage. My brother had already stepped back into the kitchen, bless him, pretending to make tea while probably eavesdropping like a hawk. She kept glancing over her shoulder, unsure whether to shout or cry. And I, coward that I am, stayed in the hallway, half hidden behind the wall, watching the woman I married unravel in real time. "I didn't plan it," she said out loud, even though no one had asked. Her voice cracked, like she wasn't used to hearing herself be this raw. "I didn't plan for any of this. I didn't know I was that unhappy." That word hit me like a punch in the ribs. Unhappy. As if I hadn't tried. As if years of patience, silence, gift-giving, and walking on emotional eggshells hadn't been my desperate attempts to keep her smiling. It wasn't like I ever made her feel unsafe, or unloved, or unwanted. I just didn't challenge her, I guess. I didn't excite her. She paced a few steps, then stopped in front of a photo on my brother's wall, some vacation shot of his kids at the lake. I could see the tears now. Not sobbing, not theatrical, just that quiet kind of weeping that you try to fight off but lose to anyway. I kept thinking he was temporary, she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. Like just a breath of air. Just something that wasn't routine. But then, he started saying things I used to want to hear from you. I felt my hands ball into fists. Not from anger, not exactly. It was something more pathetic than that. Shame. I hated how deeply her words mattered to me even now, after everything. Even after catching her in a lie, even after watching her light up across the table from another man, I still found myself waiting for her to say she regretted it. Like a fool. She sat down on the couch, finally, setting the box beside her. "I don't think I realized what I'd done until I saw that picture," she said. "You sitting there. Alone. Knowing. Watching. And still not saying a word." I took a breath and stepped out from behind the wall. Her eyes widened, and for the first time in years, she looked startled by me. Not because I'd raised my voice. Not because I was angry. But because I was finally silent in a way she couldn't manipulate. "I wasn't watching," I said. "I was leaving." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. I walked past her, picked up the necklace box from the cushion, and held it for a second before putting it on the table in front of her. "You never asked where the rest of the things are," I said. "What I didn't leave in the storage unit." "What do you mean?" she asked, voice small. "I mean the letters. The photos. The journal I kept for 13 years where I wrote down every time you hurt me and I stayed quiet about it. Every time you rolled your eyes when I was trying to talk. Every time you forgot something that mattered to me. Every night you turned away when I reached out." Her lip trembled. You kept a journal?" "I kept everything," I said, flatly. "Because I thought if I ever lost you, I'd need a way to remember how hard I tried." We just stared at each other then. No noise in the room but the distant hum of the fridge and the tick of my brother's clock above the door. 1,000 things she could have said floated in the air, but none came. Maybe she finally understood that this wasn't about a dinner, or a man, or even the lie. It was about erosion. The slow kind. The kind that takes years and still catches you off guard. She left that night without saying goodbye. Took the necklace with her. Not because it meant anything, but because it meant everything. And I knew, even before she closed the door again, that she wasn't done with me yet. Because the journal? She wanted to read it. And I was going to let her. Just not all at once. 2 days after she left my brother's house without another word, I got the message. No greeting, no apology, no explanation. Just 4 words on the screen of my phone like a ghost had sent them. Can I read it? I stared at the text for over an hour. I didn't reply. I didn't delete it either. I just let it sit there like a wound I couldn't close and couldn't ignore. She meant the journal. The one I told her about. The one she thought I'd written as some emotional venting exercise. But it wasn't just pages of sadness and disappointment. It was the last remaining evidence of the person I'd become under her silence, her subtle dismissals, her careless lies. It was a record of survival, not dramatic, not angry, just quiet observations of how love dies when one person is always bending and the other never notices. I waited 3 more days before I sent her anything. When I did, I didn't send her a scan or a photo or even a typed-up excerpt. I handwrote 1 page, tore it out, folded it neatly, and left it in her mailbox. No name. No envelope. Just the page. The entry was dated 2 years earlier, long before any of this obvious cheating had started. Long before dinners with other men. It was from the night she came home late from work and told me she was too tired to talk. I had cooked dinner. I'd even tried making that weird soup her mom used to make, the one she claimed no one but her could get right. She never even took a bite. Said she was full, walked past me, and went straight to bed. I didn't say anything back then. Just smiled, cleaned the dishes, and wrote in the journal. She didn't look at me tonight. Not once. I asked her about her day. She said, "It's the same as every day," and walked away. I wanted to believe she was tired, but it felt more like she didn't want to let me in. I wonder how many more nights I'll get before she forgets I'm here at all. That was all I gave her. 1 page. 2 days later, she knocked on my brother's door again. I didn't answer. I watched through the peephole. She was wearing a hoodie, no makeup, hair in a messy bun. She looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but emotionally. Like someone had finally peeled back the layers and she wasn't sure what to do with what was left. She stood there for a while, probably assuming I was too scared to face her again. And maybe I was. But I wasn't going to be predictable anymore. That's what she always counted on. Me being the soft one. The one who caves. The one who apologizes even when I'm not wrong. This time, I wanted her to feel what silence felt like on the other end. That night, she sent another message. This one longer. I didn't know it had started that early. I thought things were still okay then. I didn't mean to ignore you. I just thought you were used to the way I am. I didn't know you were taking notes. That last line got to me. Not in a comforting way. In a chilling way. I didn't know you were taking notes. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't even sadness. It was fear. She was afraid of how much I'd noticed. How much I'd recorded. She was afraid of the mirror I was holding up. Because for once, I wasn't the one trying to fix what was broken. I wasn't the one begging. She was. I waited until the next morning, then sent her a second page. This one was from 8 months ago, the night I found her phone left unlocked on the bathroom counter and saw a message thread that had been deleted just a few minutes later. I never confronted her. Never even told her I saw it. Just wrote down the exchange, word for word, before she could wipe it from memory. Thanks for last night. I forgot what it felt like to be wanted. Next time, no guilt. You deserve this. I didn't even know who he was. Still don't. Maybe the same man from the restaurant, maybe not. But reading those words again, writing them in ink this time, somehow gave me control I never had back then. And mailing it to her instead of confronting her in person? That was me rewriting the story she thought she had authored. This time, she didn't knock on the door. She called. 5 times. I didn't answer a single one. She left a voicemail around midnight. Her voice sounded brittle, like it might fall apart with one more sentence. Please, Warren. Please just let me explain. I didn't mean for it to get like this. I thought you'd never say anything. I thought you didn't care anymore. But I see it now. I really see it. I listened to that message 5 times. Not because I missed her, but because I wanted to memorize the moment she realized I was no longer waiting for her to come back. I had more pages. Dozens. And she wanted them. But I wasn't going to hand them over all at once. I wanted her to earn them. Page by page. Memory by memory. Regret by regret. 3 more pages. That's how many I sent her over the next week. Each one carefully chosen, not from the most painful memories, but the quietest ones. The nights that didn't end in fights, or slamming doors, or even raised voices. The entries that read like a man whispering in the dark, unsure if anyone would ever hear him. I wanted her to feel what it was like to slowly disappear in a house where your name is spoken less and less, where your smile becomes something that only lives in old photos. I wanted her to see how many times I let her walk past me without asking why my eyes were glassy, or why I slept on the edge of the bed like a guest in my own life. I didn't write them to hurt her. I didn't even write them for revenge. I wrote them because it was all I had left when I stopped being hurt. After the third new page arrived, she stopped texting. No calls. No knocking. For 5 whole days, she went silent. Part of me thought she was done, that maybe she had finally decided to let it all go, throw the journal pages away, and vanish into the comfort of someone who made her feel exciting again. And honestly, a piece of me hoped she would. Because dragging her through this slow, paper-cut truth-telling wasn't freeing me the way I thought it would. I was still waking up with that ache in my chest. Still folding phantom laundry I wasn't responsible for anymore. Still looking at her coffee mug in the cupboard and reaching for it like it meant something. But then, just when I was ready to stop, a new letter showed up. It wasn't a message or a voicemail or another visit. It was handwritten, in her handwriting, folded twice and left on my car windshield. No name. No salutation. Just 7 lines. I read every word. I cried after page 2. I threw up after page 4. You were always watching. You saw me even when I didn't see myself. Please give me a chance to do something that matters. Let me make this right, not with flowers or fake apologies, but with whatever truth is left between us. I didn't know what to feel. She wasn't asking to come back. She wasn't even asking to be forgiven. She was asking to face something she'd ignored for years. And the part of me that had spent so long curled up in the quiet of that journal didn't know whether to open the door or deadbolt it for good. But something in that letter felt real. So I gave her a task. The next morning, I dropped off a small cardboard box outside her apartment. Inside were 5 envelopes, each labeled with a date and a number. No instructions. No notes. Just the envelopes. They weren't journal entries. They were blank. Empty sheets. I wanted to see what she would do with them. 2 days later, I received an email from a burner account. It had 5 scanned pages. 5 moments from her perspective. 5 handwritten confessions. The first was from the early years. The time she pretended to be sick so she could cancel our anniversary plans because she didn't want to tell me she forgot the reservation and couldn't get another. She said she cried in the bathroom for an hour that night, not out of guilt, but from the panic of realizing she didn't love me the same way anymore. The second was about a man named Devin. Not the one from the restaurant. Someone earlier. A client from her boutique. She said they never did anything, but admitted to emotional territory I had no idea she was wandering into. She wrote that she loved how he made her feel unpredictable, and that coming home to me afterward always felt like washing away the guilt in warm, safe water. The third was the one that cracked me. It was about my mother's funeral. She wrote that she hadn't wanted to go, that she resented how much I leaned on her in the days after, that she forced herself to smile and hold my hand not out of love, but because she was afraid people would notice how checked out she had become. She confessed that while I gave the eulogy, she wasn't listening, she was texting someone else. I couldn't finish the last 2 that night. I turned off my phone, curled up on the guest bed at my brother's, and cried like I hadn't since I was 15. It wasn't just what she said, it was the realization that I'd built my life around someone who had been emotionally absent for so long, I had forgotten what presence even felt like. But the strangest part? I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. She had finally met me at my level. Not the level of drama or grand gestures or screaming at each other in a rainstorm like some soap opera. She met me in the quiet, in the blank spaces, in the unwritten parts of what we never said. And for the first time in 13 years, I felt something shift. Not reconciliation, not closure, just the tiniest possibility that maybe this wasn't the end of the story. But it would depend on what she wrote next. I waited 3 full days before I opened the final 2 pages. I kept them in my desk drawer at my brother's place, tucked between tax receipts and expired coupons, pretending they didn't exist. I told myself I was tired, that I was too busy, that I needed space. But the truth was, I was terrified. Not of what they might say, but of what they might awaken in me. I had built up so much quiet armor over the years that the thought of feeling something raw again made my chest tighten. I wasn't sure I could take another hit. But eventually, curiosity and weakness won. The 4th page was dated 7 months ago. She wrote about a dinner party we had hosted for her coworkers. I'd spent all day cleaning the apartment, preparing a new recipe I had Googled and tested 3 times. She arrived late, barely acknowledged the effort, and spent the whole night sipping wine with her manager while I played host to strangers who barely knew my name. That night, after everyone left, she went straight to bed without a word. I had chalked it up to exhaustion. But in the letter, she wrote this: "I wanted to love you that night. I really did. You tried so hard. And all I could feel was numbness. You were gentle and warm and proud of the food, and I just felt tired of pretending I fit into the life you wanted." I smiled for the guests, but in my head, I kept asking myself, when did his love start to feel like guilt? That line hit me like ice water. His love started to feel like guilt. I didn't even know what that meant, not fully. Had I smothered her? Had I been too careful, too agreeable, too soft? All those nights I stayed quiet to avoid conflict. Maybe they didn't come off as patience. Maybe they came off as avoidance, as weakness. I thought I was being the rock. Maybe I was just fading. The fifth page was the shortest of all. Only 5 sentences. It was about the necklace, the paper crane I had left in the storage unit. I opened the box and stared at it for 2 hours. I remembered the first time you folded a paper crane in that hotel room in Seattle, and I laughed because it looked like a crushed bat. But I kept it for years. I kept it in a book you never read. You gave me that necklace thinking I'd smile. I didn't. I cried, because I realized too late that you were always paying attention, and I never was. And that was it. No signature. No closure. Just rawness. The kind that sinks into your ribs. I didn't respond right away. I took a walk around the block. I sat in the park across from the church where we'd said our vows 13 years ago. And for the first time in weeks, I stopped thinking about revenge or regret. I just let myself sit in the weight of it all. That night, I sent her a voice message. It wasn't long. Just 1 sentence. If you could go back to the night you lied and said you were with Carla, and you had 5 minutes before you walked out that door, what would you say to me? She didn't reply that night. Or the next. I thought she wouldn't respond at all. That maybe it had finally stretched too far. That maybe the shame was too big to climb over now. But on the 3rd morning, there was a knock at the back door of my brother's house. It was her. No makeup. No jewelry. No heels. She looked like someone who had walked through every emotional fire she'd built and come out the other side holding nothing but ashes. She didn't ask to come in. Just stood there holding a paper bag. I opened the door. Said nothing. Just waited. She handed me the bag. Inside was that old book from our shelf. The one I never read, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. I opened it to the middle. Pressed between the pages was the original paper crane. Faded. Flattened. Still folded. And behind it was a handwritten note. If I had 5 minutes before I walked out, I'd drop the keys. I'd sit down at the kitchen table, take your hand, and tell you I forgot how to be honest a long time ago. I'd ask you not to trust me yet, but to give me one chance to remember what it felt like when I deserved you. Just one. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just stood there, waiting. And in that moment, for the first time since all this started, I wasn't sure if I wanted to shut the door or open it wider. Because the truth was, she had nothing left to hide behind. And neither did I. I didn't invite her in. Not right away. We just stood there, 2 people who used to fall asleep wrapped around each other, now separated by 3 feet and over a decade of things we didn't say when we should have. She looked smaller than she used to. Not physically, but emotionally, like someone who had finally stopped trying to control the narrative and was willing to stand inside the wreckage with both hands up. And I couldn't look at her the same way anymore, even though some part of me wanted to. Not because I trusted her, I didn't, but because I wanted, so badly, for something to make sense again. Eventually, I stepped aside. Not because I'd forgiven her, but because I needed to hear what she'd say when she had nothing left to defend herself with. She walked into the kitchen like she was stepping into a crime scene. Sat down at the same table where I used to leave handwritten notes in her lunch bags. It still had the faint stain from when we tried making homemade sangria and ended up laughing for 20 minutes straight after the blender exploded. She stared at that stain now like it was an open wound. "I don't expect you to believe anything I say," she began, and I almost cut her off right there, because I didn't. But I stayed quiet. I needed to hear what her voice sounded like when it wasn't wrapped in excuses. She went on, slowly, cautiously. "I wasn't looking to replace you. I just stopped seeing you. And that's not your fault. I just didn't know how to love someone who never gave up on me, even when I gave up on myself." I folded my arms, not out of anger, but because it was the only way to stop my hands from shaking. "Then why lie? Why cheat? Why not just leave me?" She swallowed hard. "Because you were still trying. You were still folding my laundry, fixing things I didn't even ask you to fix, leaving me notes like we were still in year one. And I felt like a fraud every time I walked through the door. You were still showing up for a marriage I had already abandoned in my head. The words hit harder than I wanted them to. Not because they were cruel, but because they were true. I didn't want to be the one who ruined everything, she added. I thought I could just keep walking through the motions until the numbness faded, but it didn't. And then the numbness turned into guilt, and the guilt turned into resentment. I leaned forward then, for the first time since she'd sat down. And now, she looked up at me. Really looked. Now I just want to stop pretending. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was heavy, like the air between us had become thick with all the weight we'd been avoiding for years. There was so much I wanted to say, and none of it would have helped. So instead, I got up, walked into the other room, and came back with the journal. The original. The leather-bound one she didn't know still existed. I placed it on the table between us. She stared at it like it might bite her. I thought you gave me all the pages, she whispered. No, I said. I gave you the ones you needed. These are the ones you earned. She reached out, but I didn't let go of it yet. You said you wanted to stop pretending. Then here's your chance. I want you to read every page. Not all at once. Just one a day. And when you finish one, you write a response. Doesn't have to be long. Just honest. She blinked. You want me to respond to every entry? Every single one. She opened her mouth like she was about to argue, then closed it again. Instead, she nodded. Slowly. Thoughtfully. And in that moment, for the first time since all of this began, I saw something I hadn't seen in her in years. Not love. Not regret. But humility. It was strange, almost frightening, to see her vulnerable without the drama, the manipulation, the deflection. Just a woman who realized too late that she'd taken something steady and honest and turned it into background noise. And now she wanted to listen again, even if the song had changed. She left with the journal pressed to her chest like it might burn through her skin. Said she'd start tonight. Promised to send me her first response tomorrow. And as the door closed behind her, gently this time, I felt something I didn't expect. Not hope. Not peace. But curiosity. Because now, for the first time in 13 years, I didn't know what she'd say next. She sent her first response the next morning. I almost didn't open it. I stared at the email notification for a solid 10 minutes, trying to decide whether I had the emotional energy to read what she might say. But I clicked. And what I saw surprised me. It wasn't polished. It wasn't poetic. It was awkward, vulnerable, and written more like a journal entry than a reply. She wrote, I remember that night. The soup tasted weird. I told you I wasn't hungry, but the truth is I didn't want to be seen by you. Not because I hated you, because I hated who I was becoming, and you made it harder to pretend I hadn't changed. I'm sorry I made you feel invisible. You weren't. You were everything. And I just wasn't ready to be loved that patiently. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She had finally said what I needed to hear, even if it came too late to undo what had been broken. Every day for the next 3 weeks, another reply arrived. One for each entry. Some were short. Some were brutal. One was nothing but a sentence that read, This is the one I wish I could erase. And with each page, I felt something softening in me. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition. Recognition that we had both become ghosts in our own home, and now, somehow, we were trying to come back to life. Together, but apart. Carefully. Then, on a Monday morning, something unexpected happened. She sent a voice message instead of a reply. Her voice was quiet, almost like she was afraid I'd shut it off midway. I finished the last page. I know you expected me to be angry or ashamed. I am honestly, but I'm also grateful. You didn't just give me a mirror. You gave me a second chance to see how far I had drifted. I don't deserve anything from you, but I'd like to offer something. Not an apology, not a promise, just a seat at the table. If you ever want to sit down again, not to fix the past, just to talk, I'll be there. I listened to that message twice, then 3 times. Then I got in the car. I didn't tell her I was coming. I drove to her place, stopped outside, and stared at the front door like it was some portal to a version of my life I hadn't dared to imagine in months. She opened the door before I could knock. She didn't say anything, just stepped back, wordless, to let me in. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just sat, her on the edge of the couch, me in the chair I'd picked out for her birthday 5 years ago, back when she still drank vanilla coffee and talked to me about books she'd never finish. For the first time in a long time, there was no tension. She looked at me, really looked, and said, Do you want coffee? I nodded. She went to the kitchen. And that was it. No big speech. No grand reconciliation. Just two people who had hurt each other more than they ever intended, learning how to exist in the same room again without breaking. Over the next few months, we didn't rush. We met for coffee, for walks, for long talks that started awkward but always ended with something warmer. We didn't move back in together. We didn't call it working things out. We just started again, like strangers who already knew each other's worst parts and were still willing to show up. It wasn't a happy ending, not in the movie sense. It was better. It was real. Because in the end, she didn't get the same version of me back. And I didn't want the same version of her either. We got something different, something quieter, more honest, scarred but still standing. And sometimes, that's enough.